various ideas about the afterlife and about the restless spirits of the dead, who for some unknown reason did not go to the realm of death but got stuck between two worlds, have existed in world culture for many years. There are many fascinating films and books on this topic, as well as video games, which we will discuss in more detail in this video. Dead by Daylight, an asymmetrical horror game where you can play as all sorts of maniacs and monsters, including nightmarish ghosts. Dead by Daylight is a network game in which all participants in the gameplay are divided into two asymmetrical teams, and many characters are taken from cult horror films and games. In fact, most of the maniacs presented here are of a supernatural nature, but only a few are outright ghosts with canonical signs. The most ghostly of all the ghosts in the game is the Spirit. This is a female character whose real name is Renyamaka. After her death, the girl became a vengeful and cruel ghost that haunts the survivors, using her supernatural abilities for this, including the ability to move almost instantly in space. Another ghostly playable character from among the maniacs present in the game, Dead by Daylight, is the Terrible Nurse. Once her name was Sally Smithson, and she worked as a nurse in the psychiatric hospital Crotus Pren. But once in a psychiatric hospital, disaster struck. Several dozen patients were found with their throats cut, and Sally Smithson herself disappeared. It is believed that it was then that she turned into a terrible ghost, unable to bear the horrors that were happening in the psychiatric hospital. Murdered Soul Suspect is a delightful game based on the awe-inspiring story of a murdered police detective who, after his death, did not find peace, but continued his investigation, the target of which was a mysterious maniac named the Bell Ringer. Although the game was released back in 2014 on PC, it is still quite an interesting and popular adventure horror game with a mystical detective theme. The action of the game revolves around the identity of the ghost of a detective who found himself in a new other world for himself, where exactly the same restless souls of dead people live, who do not let go of certain problems and cases that have not been resolved during earthly life. Fulfilling their requests and orders is part of the gameplay of Murdered Soul Suspect, implemented in the form of numerous side quests. There is almost no action in Murdered Soul Suspect, but there is an interesting and exciting exploration of the gloomy world of spirits, an interesting story, easy puzzles, and a special atmosphere. For a horror game, Murdered Soul Suspect is not very scary, but quite exciting, with a story that ends with a complete surprise. There are in the game and all sorts of side activities and collectibles. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. A game based on the Lord of the Rings, the hero of which was killed by the dark minions of Sauron, but then returned from the world of the dead, possessed by the spirit of an ancient angry elf with a difficult-to-pronounce name. In fact, they became a complex character, in the body of which two different personalities fit at once, whose goals largely coincided: to harm Sauron and his vile servants, and primarily the orcs. At certain moments, the spirit of the elf leaves the body of Talion, the name of the main character, but he himself, being essentially the ghost of a murdered person, is capable of a lot. The obsession of the protagonist of Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, with the ghost of an elf revealed to him many supernatural abilities. For example, he himself is armed only with a sword and a dagger, actually another dagger broken off by 1/3, but the ghost of an elf allows him to accurately shoot from a ghostly bow. The hero also knows how to penetrate the minds of the captured orcs, looking for the necessary information there, and even to subordinate the minds of the unfortunate orcs to his will. The hero also knows how to subjugate the terrible wild animals of Mordor and do many other wonderful things. An important point: Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor is an unobtrusive role-playing system that affects the combat system, many side points of activity, and, albeit a small, but cozy open-world map. There is a Parker system and a stealth moment. And the most important feature of the game Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor is a unique system for creating orc captains, whom the player can subordinate to his will and arrange all sorts of intrigues between them. A remaster of the famous adventure video game based on the famous Ghostbusters movies. The game is multi-platform, which is directly related to the action-adventure genre. It is considered one of the best game adaptations of the famous film about ghosts, and a special team dedicated to tracking down and capturing dangerous otherworldly entities. According to the plot of Ghostbusters, the video game Remastered, the player is assigned the role of a rookie in a veteran squad of ghost hunters. As before, this detachment is engaged in responding to calls about paranormal activity and if ghosts are found there, it tries to neutralize them by driving them into special proton traps. All this takes place with a third-person view and nice three-dimensional graphics. In addition to the trap, the player is equipped with a special proton cannon that fires a powerful photon beam at the ghosts. Blackwell Epiphany, 2D mystical quest with pixel art, belonging to the world-famous Blackwell game series. The game uses a mystical and detective noir setting and plot. Despite the fact that the game Blackwell Epiphany has primitive pixel art, it looks very acceptable. In practice, the game looks perfect, and in terms of its plot content, is the perfect conclusion to the famous series that started in 2006. The protagonists of the Blackwell Epiphany game are psychic detectives who help desperate ghosts and work on those cases where the ordinary police turned out to be powerless. For those who have played the Blackwell series before, it will be interesting to get acquainted with the continuation of an exciting story that spans several generations. Newcomers will also be interested to get acquainted with the new incredible franchise tied to the paranormal and detective investigations. The main character is a psychic who is haunted by a ghost who previously haunted her mother and grandmother in exactly the same way, who eventually went crazy. In order not to end up like her relatives, the heroine, under the guidance of her ghostly partner, takes on investigations to help other ghosts in trouble. The game is quite old-fashioned, which is emphasized by its large pixel graphics and jazzy soundtrack. Middle-earth, Shadow of War, the second part of action role-playing games from the Middle-earth series, dedicated to the adventures of the inseparable couple Celebrimbor and Talion, a noble elven forge and a brave dark ranger, coexisting in one body. The game has a new storyline. Now the heroes are looking for a lost powerful ring, like the Ring of Omnipotence, but not the corrupted influence of Sauron. At the same time, at the very end, they will have an epic battle directly with the main villain of the Lord of the Rings universe. The battles in Middle-earth, Shadow of War have become even more epic, the graphics are more beautiful, and the available tasks are more diverse. There are several new interesting features in the gameplay. So, now Talion can besiege and capture fortresses, using his own army of loyal orcs for this. You can also send your subordinates to fight in special fighting arenas. The game map has become several times larger, while it is based on the map of the canonical Middle-earth from books, although it has not absorbed all its vast lands. DreadOut, a third-person horror game in which a young schoolgirl fights Indonesian ghosts that can only be seen through a smartphone camera. The action of the DreadOut game takes place on a forgotten cursed island, where the heroine finds herself all alone, armed with only her favorite smartphone, and surrounded on all sides by Indonesian folklore ghosts, which the Indonesian developers of digital happiness from ancient legends and legends of their people. The first thing that catches the game DreadOut is a terrible gloomy environment, made in the characteristic style of Asian Indonesian horror. Everything around looks very uncomfortable, puts pressure on the psyche, and makes you want to finish the game ahead of schedule. In addition, invulnerable ghosts appear around every now and then, which can only be seen through a smartphone camera and scared away with a flash. The second point is the presence of complex puzzles, the solution of which is critical for further advancement in the DreadOut storyline. In general, this is a great old-fashioned horror game in the spirit of such called games as Forbidden Sire and Fatal Frame, dedicated to the confrontation between an ordinary high school girl from an Indonesian school and disgusting ghosts from a cursed island. And the outdated graphics. The game was released in 2005, only reinforced the overall impression that DreadOut is a classic old-school horror movie. Visage, a first-person horror game that forces players to explore a haunted house that is utterly gloomy. The game turned out to be very atmospheric and frightening. The mansion really looks mysterious and ominous. Its constantly changing environment is especially impressive. Interiors that are more or less comfortable and familiar to a person in the blink of an eye can change into something nightmarish and cause serious harm to the psyche of a player who does not have strong enough nerves and a stable psyche. Even the developers themselves, and they turned out to be experienced employees of the Sad Square studio, warned that their new game turned out to be incredibly scary, so a reasonable restriction for the gaming audience is needed to prevent the use of Visage by minors and even persons suffering from epileptic seizures. The developers have been working very hard for a very long time to make an impressive interior environment of a huge mansion, in which terrible, indescribably blasphemous things happen once upon a time. To make the situation in the game the way it should be in really high-quality and scary psychological horror films with a first-person view. And in the end, They achieved the desired result, creating one of the scariest PC games of 2018. Pacify. This is another widely popular PC game centered around a haunted house that hides nightmarish ghosts that frighten players in a variety of ways. The scene of action is an old, sinister mansion, equipped as a funeral home, which an ancient evil has chosen as its lair. The game supports cooperative mode. It allows the most daring players to unite into a single team of daring explorers, ready to risk their mental health and even their lives to find out the nature of the sinister mansion's terrible paranormal phenomena. Paranormal Activity Helpers Incorporated. This is the name of the organization whose employees, according to the plot, will become players in Pacify. The organization is engaged in the study of everything supernatural, and one day, the owner of an ancient house turns to them for help, in which something abnormal and unkind seems to live. The task of the players playing in the cooperative, maximum 4 players, is to find out if this is really so, and if the danger is confirmed, to expel the devilry from the walls of the cottage. An interesting point is the presence of an asymmetric mode in Pacify. It allows one of the players to take the side of supernatural evil and join the fight against his fellow gamers. There are a huge number of ways to achieve the goal and win for each of the parties. Midnight Ghost Hunt. Addictive multiplayer game with asymmetric gameplay inspired by the famous comedy film Ghostbusters. The players here are divided into 2 opposite and completely different teams. One team is a team of ghost hunters. The second team is the ghost team. The former must hunt down and catch the latter, while the latter must hide from the former, inhabit the objects of the environment, and in every possible way frighten the hunters and even attack them. The game turned out to be a sprightly multiplayer asymmetric action game for PC that takes the principle of hide and seek and complements it with the entourage of fighting ghost hunters. One detachment must catch all the rebellious ghosts before midnight, while the ghosts themselves must hide from the hunters and in every possible way prevent them from doing their work, trying to reach the saving midnight. Nancy Drew, Ghost of Thornton Hall. A new part of a series of detective games about the adventures of Detective Nancy Drew. This time, the detective must unravel the sinister mystery of a secretive family that keeps deadly mysteries related to ghosts and curses in their Thornton family residence. The abundance of dialogues and quests, the atmosphere, ghosts, all this is present here. An interesting plot twist and further unexpected development of a gloomy story about the ghost of a young girl who terrorizes an entire island, in the center of which the notorious Thornton Hall is located, are also present. The game is designed primarily for fans of the series, as well as for those who love really complex puzzles that strain the gyrus. So if you just want the setting of a ghostly investigation, without burdensome gameplay and hardcore puzzles, that Nancy Drew, Ghost of Thornton Hall, is likely to get you tired and frustrated very quickly. The game is full of mysteries and secret places, while along the way there will be a couple of quite frightening moments, which makes the detective quest Nancy Drew Ghost of Thornton Hall also a little bit of horror. Bottom line, the game has an unsettling and sometimes frightening atmosphere, an interesting plot, complex and original puzzles, pleasant music and several options, at least 3 for ending the game, which are very different from each other. Evil Dead, the game, Switch, PS, Xbox, PC. Step into the shoes of Ash Williams or his friends from the iconic Evil Dead franchise and work together in a game loaded with over-the-top co-op and PvP multiplayer action. Play as a team of 4 survivors exploring, looting, managing your fear, and finding key items to seal the breach between worlds in a game inspired by all 3 original Evil Dead films, as well as the Star's original Ash vs. Evil Dead television series. Play as characters from throughout the Evil Dead universe, including Ash, Scotty Lord Arthur, Kelly Maxwell, and more, with new dialogue performed by Bruce Campbell and others. Fight for the forces of good or take control of the Kandarian demon to hunt Ash and others while possessing deadites, the environmental objects, and more as you seek to swallow their souls. If your favorite game is not included in this list, write in the comments. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel, watch our other videos, press like, turn on notifications, and you will always be aware of what to play today.